The first thing I'm going to do is take off a chunk of my clay. I'm going to set that aside for making things like the eyes, nose, any other sort of accessories that I want. I'm going to take that larger piece of clay, I'm going to roll it into a ball. And to make a pinch pot, I stick my thumb into that ball and I just pinch around the sides. I turn and pinch over and over so it gets nice and rounded. I want the walls of my pinch pot to be generally about as thick as my finger. If it's a little bit thicker, that's okay. If it's a little thinner, that's okay. I just don't want it paper thin or it can crack and break too easily. And I don't want it super, super thick or I might worry about it not drying out properly and blowing up in the kiln. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the time to smooth over any cracks. I want to smooth over the surface, so I just dip my fingers into the water and smooth over cracks that I see. Okay, now I have a relatively solid and smooth pinch pot to build on, and I'm going to start adding features. I want to make an eye, so I'm going to start with just a little chunk of clay. I'm going to roll it into a ball, and I'm going to press it flat. So it's a circle, not a sphere. I can't just press this onto my sculpture because when it dries, it will fall off. So what I need to do is wet my pinch pot right where I want to put that eye. I wet this little circle of clay. I scratch both pieces. And then I press both pieces together. I usually sort of twist it a little bit so those loose edges get tangled together. I always remember slip, scratch, smooth. I wet it, scratch it, then smooth over the cracks. The water makes the clay soft and sticky. Scratching creates loose edges that get tangled together, sort of like Velcro. And smoothing over those cracks, smoothing over the seams where the pieces of clay are joined, helps to get the two pieces unified so the two become one. Now when I add an eye, I don't like to just leave it as a raised circle. I find it's helpful to put a pupil in there. So I just use the back of my needle tool and I just poke in a little hole for the pupil on that eye. That also helps me to make sure the pieces are pressed together nicely. In this case, I think I'm going to make this a pirate. So instead of making a second eye, I'm going to make a little eye patch. I'm going to roll a little ball of clay, I'm going to press it flat, and that'll actually work as a pretty nice eye patch. I'm just going to flatten it out a little bit at the top. Really, with all the features that I'm adding, I'm going through pretty much the same steps. Whenever I add pieces, I need to remember slip, scratch, smooth. I wet it, scratch it, and smooth over the cracks. With pretty much all the shapes that I'm adding to this form, I always try to start off with a basic shape, either a ball of clay or a coil of clay, and then I make adjustments from there. You can be creative, you can do a lot of different stuff, but I sort of recommend taking a cartoonish approach, reducing things to a collection of simple shapes and simpler forms. With pretty much everything I add to decorate my pinch pot, I'm just using a ball of clay to start or a coil of clay to start. So I roll a little ball of clay to make the nose, I press it flat, again slip, scratch, smooth, and I can also use some more of those subtractive methods, pressing tools into the clay to make the nostrils, or I might smooth out the eye patch and then scratch lines to create a textured pattern in there. Sometimes adding textures and patterns can make different features stand out. It creates a little bit of contrast in the design, and that can really enhance the overall look of your pinch pot. The next thing I'm going to do is add 4 legs. So I just made 4 little balls of clay, and again, wet it, scratch it, smooth over the cracks. I really try to make sure that I take a little extra time and extra effort to smooth over those cracks on the legs. Since they're going to need to support the weight of the entire pinch pot above it, I want to make sure that those legs won't fall off. So I try to make sure that after I've pressed them on, I push clay from the legs onto the body, or from the body onto the legs, to make sure it's really well unified, really well integrated into my sculpture. I always look for little opportunities to add more details, like scratching in lines for toes on those legs and things like that. And of course, what kind of a pig would not have the corkscrew tail? So I just rolled a little coil and I attached a tail on the back. Now when I think I'm finished, I always want to take a moment to look it over and pay close attention to the texture. I want to make sure everything's well attached, and I want to smooth over the surface, smooth over the cracks and everything the best that I possibly can. So I hold it up, I look at it from all different angles, because once it's gone through the kiln, once it's hardened, I'm not going to be able to re-sculpt it. I'm not going to be able to make adjustments to that form. And that's about it.